which is I'm not going to touch on any Texas-specific issues today. Well, why is that? Well, the reason is that if I do, I may suddenly turn myself into a lobbyist, accidentally, or I could turn my employer, the Institute for Justice, into one of these dread dark money groups. To do so would have very negative impacts for my speech and for their speech, and so I am consciously avoiding talking about things that are in the public's interest. The government is not allowed to limit peaceful political advocacy or to trample on privacy rights when you exercise your First Amendment rights. But that is what this debate is about today. Dark money, which is the topic of today's debate, is a scare term. It's just a scare term. It's meant to obscure more than it is to clarify. What does it mean? It refers to just ordinary Americans donating to nonprofit groups that support issues they care about. This is not about money to candidates, money to political parties, or money to political committees. The Supreme Court has made clear for a number of years that these are different kinds of organizations that have different privacy interests and affect different government interests. Indeed, for decades now, nonprofit groups have been allowed to engage in political speech while keeping their donors anonymous. This has nothing to do with the Citizens United decision. Nonprofits have been free to engage in independent speech since at least 1986 in a case called Massachusetts Citizens for Life v. FEC. It's only recently that anyone thought to decry these nonprofits as dark money groups, which is really strange, because some of the best known organizations in America today are precisely this sort of organization. The AARP, Planned Parenthood, the NRA, Sierra Club. These and literally thousands more organizations just like them are what people are referring to when they say dark money groups. It would be literally impossible for these organizations to be involved in what they do to further their missions if they weren't involved in the political process, because the views and issues that they advocate are inherently tied up in the political process. These groups, again, don't give money to candidates or to anyone else associated with candidates. Instead, what they do is they spend their own money to speak about issues that they believe, including sometimes, yes, informing the public about positions that candidates hold or the potential outcomes of various ballot reforms. This is the very essence of engagement in the marketplace of ideas. But certain activists don't like that people can support causes or ideas without the government and everyone else in the world knowing about it. The problem is twofold here. It's an obvious violation of privacy. The other problem, of course, here is that too often proponents of forced government reporting simply don't like what is being said and want it silenced. Similarly, politicians who support forced government reporting often do so because they don't like it when people say negative things about them. But not liking what is being said is not a reason to regulate speech. Beyond which, dark money groups put their own name on their speech. The question here today is, why should we pry into who gave them what that allowed them to speak? Anonymous speech, the Supreme Court has held in the First Amendment context and in electoral speech, is not a pernicious, fraudulent practice, but an honorable tradition of advocacy and dissent, which exemplifies the purpose behind the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment in particular. The good news is that the Supreme Court has already protected anonymity when it comes to nonprofit groups engaging in political speech. Why do we protect privacy when it comes to speech? Well, there are three reasons. First of all, it's none of the government's business. That's pretty much the easiest one. The second one is it's particularly dangerous to force individuals who hold unpopular or dissident views to disclose their identities. We have to protect them from reprisals, not just from the government, but also from society as a whole, or elements of society. This not only protects their First Amendment rights, it protects our First Amendment rights to engage in our own unpopular speech, but I think just as importantly, it protects our First Amendment right to hear all points of view. It's critical under the First Amendment not just that we be able to say what we think, but that we be able to hear what other people say. Because it's only through combat of ideas that society advances and that we learn more than we know today. Beyond just this, privacy allows speech to be about ideas, not the speaker. You've all heard of the ad hominem attack. Well, it's far too common in politics today. Privacy allows particularly polarizing or unpopular individuals or groups to have their speech judged on the content of their ideas and not on, say, the color of the speaker's skin, right? We all have organizations or groups or individuals that we dismiss out of hand because we don't like them. But it doesn't mean these individuals or groups have necessarily entirely wrong ideas. In fact, it may be particularly important for us to not know who is speaking against the points of view that we like, or for us to not know that our political enemies are speaking, because it forces us, again, to engage in the actual content of what is being said. The best judge of the truthfulness of speech, the rightness of speech, is the speech itself. Forced government reporting mandates that you include your name, your address, your occupation, and your employer when you do things like engage in the political process. But there's no reason to stop there. If privacy doesn't exist in the political world, as one Supreme Court justice has noted, government would be free to require people to disclose all kinds of information: race, religion, political affiliation, sexual orientation, ethnic background, and, notably he said in this case, also interest group participation. Even if we believe or assume that certain advocates are responsible and sincere in their belief that forced government reporting is good and useful, wrong, but sincere, we have to recognize that for every one of them there's a zealot whose goal is to use reporting as a cudgel to silence the opposition. And if you are okay with silencing the opposition, you cannot complain when these laws are turned around on you. It's bad enough to be naive, don't also be a hypocrite. We already know what happens when political donations are made public. There are literally hundreds of examples on the left and the right of people being targeted and harassed because of the candidates they support or the ideas they support. What we don't know is how many people have been silenced, have been unwilling to participate at all because of the fear that these sorts of laws create. What we also don't know is the number of people who have had their ideas dismissed out of hand, as opposed to have people actually engage with these ideas because of who they are. Remember, if you support, say, abortion rights and you want to give to Planned Parenthood, but you work for a Catholic hospital or a school, you're going to be hard-pressed to really follow through with that. Ultimately, government reporting laws don't do the things that reformers promise. Since enacted, trust in government is lower, incumbent retention rates are higher. Instead, government reporting only imposes burdens on speech and association and scares ordinary Americans out of political engagement.